Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We're doing it live and doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. We get right down to business right after Guy Benson, now at 3 o'clock here on 790 KBC. And we do all this just before the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang at 5. Mottek On Money, live on the air on 790 KBC. Streaming live online worldwide at KBC.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KBC.com, Apple, iTunes, YouTube, all of your favorite podcast platforms. We'll be focusing on the Southern California firestorms this afternoon. Stay with 790 KBC for the very latest on the ongoing catastrophic firestorms here in Southern California and how you can help the fire victims. Now, the stock market moved sharply lower today in reaction to a better-than-expected jobs report. I'll talk about that later this hour with veteran market watcher Art Hogan, Managing Director and Chief Market Strategist at L.A.-based B. Riley Wealth Management. But first, the unthinkable has happened this week. 10 people dead, more than 10,000 homes and businesses in the Los Angeles area have been destroyed in the ongoing firestorm catastrophe here in Southern California. And joining us live now is Sean INOUE, Executive Director of the Western Los Angeles chapter of the American Red Cross, which has established shelters for the firestorm victims. They're also organizing volunteers to help the fire survivors and providing many other resources in this crisis. Sean INOUE, thank you very much for taking the call here at this critical moment this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us.
From your perspective, give us an update on what's happening at this moment.
Well, the good news is Santa Monica just lifted some of their evacuation orders for some of the areas north of Montana between San Vicente. So some of the folks that have been staying here in the shelter are able to go back home, get some rest if they're comfortable and the air quality allows for it. Otherwise, these folks here are waiting for the Palisades fire to get out. And just like we're seeing across the entire Southland, folks are not sure whether their houses are still there. And our focus remains on emergency shelter, feeding, emotional support, and physical support, whether it's medical or otherwise.
On there live with Sean INOUE with the American Red Cross. Tell us where your shelters are located here in Southern California.
The best place to check for active Red Cross shelters right now is to go to redcross.org. The biggest three shelters we have right now are the Westchester shelter here the Westwood shelter, the Westwood Rec Center, the Stoner Park Rec Center. We're up in the Valley as well, and then in Pasadena, but I don't want to give you the wrong information. That changes very wildly. So redcross.org, check for active locations.
All right, and tell us, in addition to the shelters, tell us what else the American Red Cross is doing to help people in this unbelievable situation here at the moment.
Yeah, right now, while we're still in the response phase of this, the priorities are always going to be emergency shelter, feeding, water, emotional and physical comfort. As we head into the recovery phase of this, we're going to understand what the damage assessment looks like, and if families can go back to their homes, a lot of them will not be able to. So with our partnering agencies, we're going to do what's called shelter resident transition work. We're going to do casework, and that's all because of the power of our volunteers and the generosity of our donors.
Since you're on the front line of all of this, many wealthy people lost their homes there in the Pacific Palisades, and the homeless situation now getting even worse at the moment, given the fact that homes have literally been wiped out here. Give us a view of what people are telling you there as they get into those shelters and how grateful they are when they find a place to go at this point.
Yeah, people are grateful to have a roof over their head and basically their basic human needs met right now. But, there's this big narrative about everybody in the Palisades of the West Side being wealthy, but the folks in our shelter are folks who are maybe elderly or have inherited their homes or maybe don't have the social capital to have a friend to go to. So a lot of these folks are going to be stuck without options for housing afterwards. And as you mentioned, housing is already a problem here in Los Angeles, so it's going to be hard, but we're going to work with all of our partners to make sure we have a place for these folks to go.
That is very heartbreaking, but encouraging that the American Red Cross is stepping up at this critical moment. So tell us how it works then when somebody comes to the shelter, they're able to stay there, get food and all sorts of help and resources, and then beyond that, are you able to help the folks get resettled then?
Absolutely. So one of the things we want to make sure people know is that if you've been displaced by this fire, you don't have to be staying at a shelter to grab a hot meal, talk to some of our folks about what next steps may look like once this recovery phase starts, and just have a conversation with the folks who are experiencing the same thing. There's a lot of hope here at their shelters to make sure that folks are really kind of coming together to figure out what those next steps look like, and we're going to be there the whole way.
And John, you've been doing this for a long time with your humanitarian work here in this area for many, many years. Have you ever seen a situation like this here?
This is, as it's been said a lot, unprecedented. The speed of which this fire moved is very reminiscent of what happened in Maui. Thankfully, the loss of life, although there is a tragic loss of life here, isn't as large, and hopefully it remains that way because of the tireless work of our first responders, the coordination between our cities, our county, and our state and federal governments. So hoping that trend continues, and as winds, we get a break in them, we'll see this destruction hopefully pause, but time will tell.
What's unnerving, of course, is that it's still ongoing with fierce winds expected possibly through the weekend. It might even be picking up on Monday. How are you gearing up for a possible worsening situation out there?
Yeah, Red Crosses are here. We have the troops have arrived. All of our partners are standing up to make sure that the immediate needs of folks are met while this fire is being fought. So we're ready to scale if needed. If more folks are displaced, we'll definitely have a place for them. And they should either download the Watch Duty app or visit redcross.org to find our open shelters if they're looking for emergency sheltering.
And, of course, business people and those who are fortunate enough to not be in the fire zones at this point are eager to help, either by volunteering or with financial support. What's the best way people can help you at this point?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. The outpouring from the community has been inspiring, and I'm not surprised because of Los Angeles here together. We're pretty strong. We have had a deluge of in-kind donations, food, water, clothing, diapers, you name it. So the best way for folks to make a difference right now is to make a financial contribution online by visiting redcross.org, signing up to become a volunteer at redcross.org/volunteer, or to find a blood donation center somewhere across the Southland, because just as everyone else has been impacted, blood collections have been impacted severely as well, and we're making sure our patients have the medicine that they need.
And that's an important point. Are you, obviously, with burn victims probably increasing given the current emergency here, what are you hearing about the medical needs at this point? And obviously the Red Cross also is getting donated blood, and how can people do that?
Yeah, so they can visit redcrossblood.org to find a blood donation center near them. They call 1-800-RED-CROSS. These still happen. Partners are stepping up to put blood drives on within a week's notice to make sure we're making up for some of the blood drives that we've had to cancel. But we can't get that anywhere else. That's because donors roll up their sleeve. They give part of themselves away so that a patient in one of our hospitals has the medicine they need for their surgery, their traumas, whether it's burns, cancer treatments. Blood is used every 2 seconds, and unfortunately, we can't manufacture it. It's got to come from the generosity of our donors.
We're on there live with Sean INOUE, who is the executive director of the Western Los Angeles chapter of the American Red Cross. And on a very busy day, and it looks like it's going to be a busy weekend and a busy week ahead. As far as preparations, of course, you also offer a lot of emergency preparation resources there at the Red Cross, and with these fires popping up with little or no notice. We had that horrible emergency situation in the heart of Hollywood this week, for example, and other fires popping up in the valley and so forth. What's your advice here in preparation for the unexpected this weekend and the week ahead?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Be prepared is an overarching statement that we give people, but make sure you have your apps downloaded, like the Watch Duty app. You're signed up for city alerts, and you're keeping an eye on air quality as well for those folks who have breathing issues or maybe have respiratory issues. Certain things you can pack right now. You can make photocopies of your important documents, any important medications, and also remember things like medication for your pets, your children, any other important documents that you might need to recover once you leave your home.
And speaking of pets, tell us once again, are pets permitted in the shelters there?
Yeah, absolutely. Pets are part of our family, so all of our shelters are taking small animals right now. If you are able to plan effectively or have more time to evacuate because you've had advance notice, please try and bring a small crate for them, but if not, we have them here as well. If it's a service animal, of course, they're welcome. If you have larger animals, there are large animal evacuation centers across the valley. Again, I recommend checking out either the Watch Duty app or visiting redcross.org to find out those specific locations.
How many people are in the shelters at the moment?
Hundreds. This number is dynamic. So right here in the Westwood Rec Center, we have between 200 and 300 shelter residents here. Across the Southlands, we're talking, close to 1,000, if not 2.
And that's a beautifully recently renovated center there, the Westwood Recreation Center. So for the children, there's something to do there too?
There's a great park next door. Kids are resilient. It's been a nice source of hope here for the folks who are unsure about whether or not they're going to have a home to go back to. So we're grateful for our partners and all their great work here at the county and the city for opening this up and making sure it's habitable and clean and very nice for all of our shelter residents who are really suffering right now.
Certainly. Can you share any other stories that you've encountered firsthand there at the front line over the past couple of days? The desperation and the panic, really, that people experienced this week that have come to you for help.
Sure, it's heartbreaking. Every person that comes in here isn't sure if their home's going to be there when they get back. They may not have experienced a fire of this magnitude or speed before. They may be new to Los Angeles. They may have just purchased a home or just moved to the area. Everyone's got a story here about evacuating in an emergency and not knowing what's next. The inspiring thing is how they're coming together. Not just the folks here in the shelter, but the folks that are coming from all across the city and even further south to bring water, blankets, food, clothing. And that's why we're really shifting folks to focus on those other three priorities for the best ways they can help.
And repeat those options again for donations, please.
Yeah, you can make a financial contribution by visiting redcross.org. You can also sign up to volunteer. We're going to need shelter workers and other disaster volunteers, not just for this operation, but for future operations. So when you go there, you can get your background check done. We'll be doing what's called rapid intake for disaster shelter workers. And you can sign up for shifts once you've been background checked and you've gotten the training. And then the last thing you can do is go and donate blood at one of our blood donation centers by visiting redcrossblood.org.
Are you looking for any particular expertise among the volunteers? Anyone with certain experience or expertise especially helpful at this point?
Yeah, so anybody with medical licenses or mental health licenses, they're called disaster health workers and disaster mental health volunteers. So when you go to the website and you sign up to volunteer and you type in that zip code, you're going to get a laundry list of volunteer open positions. But if you are one of those people with one of those licenses, please select that you would like to serve as a disaster health volunteer or a disaster mental health volunteer. And because of the priority need for those, we will expedite your application.
All right. So you're at the big center there in Westwood, right? What's the location there, and where can people get information about where all of the shelters are located?
So you can visit redcross.org and search for our disaster shelter locations. We are at the Westwood Rec Center right now. We have capacity if folks are looking for shelter, food, water, comfort. You don't have to be staying at any of these shelters if you would like to receive any services or just come and get information. We ask again that if anybody's bringing materials, just check in with the shelter beforehand, or like I said, go to the other three sites.
Anything else you'd like to mention at this critical moment before we let you off the hook? Are these shelters open 24 hours a day as the situation, as you say, is extremely dynamic and things can change on a dime at this point? Are people able to access all of the shelters 24 hours a day?
Absolutely. So we'll always have Red Cross volunteers here and our partner volunteers here as well, making sure that people who are looking for shelter can have it regardless of the time of day, 24 hours and however long this operation lasts.
Sean INOUE, we'll let you get back to your important work. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to our audience here, and we wish you and everyone there all the best, and the prayers going up to all here in Southern California. That is Sean INOUE, Executive Director of the Western Los Angeles chapter of the American Red Cross. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thanks so much, and stay safe, everybody.
All right, we will stay in touch with you, Sean, and I do have a list now of the 4 shelter locations, Red Cross shelters for evacuees and fire evacuees here in Southern California. The Westwood Recreation Center, which you mentioned, that's at 1350 South Sepulveda Boulevard in Los Angeles. Also, the El Camino Real Charter High School is now set up as a Red Cross shelter at 5440 Valley Circle Boulevard in Woodland Hills in the San Fernando Valley. Also, the Richie Valens Recreation Center at 10736 Laurel Canyon Boulevard. That one is in Pacoima in the San Fernando Valley. And in Pasadena, the Red Cross shelter is located at the Pasadena Convention Center, now established as a Red Cross shelter at 300 East Green Street in Pasadena. And now the latest on traffic here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC, and stay with 790 KABC for the firestorm coverage. Rough day for the stock market today. We'll be speaking live to one of the top market analysts coming up here shortly. Art Hogan, Chief Market Strategist at LA-based B. Riley, will be joining me live coming up here in the next half hour. The Dow coming in for a closing loss today of nearly 700 points, down 697 at 41,938. The S&P 500 slipping 91 at 5,827, and the NASDAQ sliding 317 points at 19,161. This following the release of the latest jobs report, which came out first thing this morning, and that jobs report came in better than most analysts had expected. And this has Wall Street believing that the Fed is likely to not lower interest rates again, maybe even for the rest of the year. The report showed the economy added more jobs in December than economists expected, sparking a jump in Treasury bond yields, which we've been watching closely this week. The yield on the 10-year note all the way up to 4.77%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, which have suddenly hit the highest we've seen since November of 2023. For this rough week, the Dow and S&P 500 dropped nearly 2% each, while the NASDAQ slid 2.3%. Our markets were closed yesterday for the National Day of Mourning in honor of President Jimmy Carter, who died recently at the age of 100. I'll discuss the latest market news and news on the economy coming up later this hour with veteran market watcher Art Hogan, Managing Director and Chief Market Strategist at LA-based B. Riley Wealth Management. Taking a look at the cryptos now, we see Bitcoin all over the place this week. Right now down about 200 at 94,450. Ethereum down $5 at 3,261. And Doge at the moment has pulled back to 33 cents. Among the winners today, shares of Walgreens up nearly 28% today. On the flip side, we see among the losers today, down about 17%. As a matter of fact, Constellation Brands pulling back 17%, down $37 at 181 and change. The VIX index, the so-called Wall Street Fear Index, the volatility index spiked today, up 10%. The price of gold moving higher, up $26.60 at $2,717.40 an ounce. Silver also moving higher, up nearly 30 cents to $31.30 an ounce. Price of oil also moving up nearly $3 today. It's $76.57 in New York. All of this as the dollar continues to firm overseas. We see right now against the British pound, we're at 122. Against the euro, we're almost at parity at 102. We're at 157.70 versus the Japanese yen. Shares of the so-called Magnificent One NVIDIA pulling back more than $4 today to $135.91. Apple moving lower today by nearly $6 at $236.85. Checking the oil names, which have been rising lately, ExxonMobil shares, of course, the big dog in the oil patch, pulling back today by 39 cents at 106.54. This as oil prices have been rising lately. The oil names have been moving higher as well. Shares of Chevron, let's bring that one up here as well. Chevron shares at the moment closing up nearly $3 today at 153.14, a net gain of just about 2%. And Hess has been on the winning list lately as well. Hess shares moving higher as well. Taking a look at some of the other names in the Magnificent Seven, Netflix, which has been on a tear lately. Let's bring up Netflix here. We do see Netflix shares been in the spotlight this week, pulling back big today, down more than $37 at $837.69. Coming up, we'll be speaking live with Art Hogan, Chief Market Strategist at LA-based B. Riley. He'll give us his assessment of today's jobs report, which came in better than most analysts had expected and impacted the market action today. We also will be speaking to veteran media expert and public relations expert Michael Levine about what's happened here in Southern California with the fire emergency. We had a chance to speak to the top person here at the American Red Cross in the Los Angeles area just a moment ago. And if you'd like to donate to the Red Cross, go to redcross.org. You can also connect with the Red Cross by phone at 1-800-RED-CROSS. That translates to 1-800-733-2767. And you can also text the word Red Cross to 90999 to make a $10 donation to the American Red Cross to support the current fire emergency effort, recovery effort, and relief effort that's underway here in Southern California. You can also connect with the Red Cross to volunteer and to make donations and help them out at the 4 shelters that have been established here in Southern California in the current fire emergency. And stay with 790 KABC for the very latest on what's happening in this catastrophe out there. The unthinkable has happened. 10 people dead, more than 10,000 homes and businesses in the Los Angeles area destroyed in the ongoing firestorm emergency here in Southern California. Now let's get the latest news for you here right now on 790 KBC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC as we continue to cover the firestorms here in Southern California. Stay with 790 KBC. Meanwhile, the stock market selling off sharply today after the jobs report came out better than expected this morning. All three of the major averages moved lower, with the Dow coming in for a closing loss of nearly 700 points today. The S&P 500 down nearly 100, and the Nasdaq slipped more than 300 points. All the major averages suffered back-to-back weekly declines. We did see the jobs report today coming out with hiring at 256,000 for the month of December, up from November. That came in stronger than expected. And the nation's unemployment rate edged down to 4.1%, a tenth of a point below expectations. Report showing the economy added more jobs in December than analysts had expected. We did see a jump in Treasury yields today, with the yield in the 10-year note now at 4.77%, the highest seen since November of 2023. For the week, both the Dow and S&P 500 down nearly 2%. The Nasdaq was down 2.3%. Joining us live now to discuss the latest news on the markets and the economy, veteran market watcher Art Hogan's with us, Managing Director and Chief Market Strategist at Los Angeles-based B. Riley Wealth Management. Art Hogan, thank you very much for taking the call this afternoon. We hope all of your LA-based colleagues are staying safe in the ongoing fire disaster here in Southern California.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Frank, and it's so good to talk to you. I've been thinking about you all week and hoping that you and your friends are staying safe. It is an unbelievable disaster going on right now, and my thoughts are with you.
Appreciate that very much, Art Hogan, and likewise, and we hope the B. Riley family are all doing well here in the Los Angeles area with such a large presence. And so thank you very much for taking the call here today. And we're watching what's happening on Main Street as well as on Wall Street, as always. And give us an update here on what happened this week.
Yeah, interesting start to the year, Frank. And very much like the start to 2023, we entered the year thinking the Fed would likely cut rates a couple of times, maybe 4 times this year, and then we backed that down and after the December meeting to 2 times. And now there's some thought that the Fed might not have to cut rates this year. And the market's kind of adjusted to that pretty quickly. But the driver behind why the Fed might not cut rates is the economy's strong. So we're creating on average about 200,000 jobs a month. 187,000 jobs is a 12-month average. The unemployment rate's at 4.1%. GDP for the last year likely comes in at or near 3%. So the economy's in good shape. The Fed doesn't have to necessarily ease rates or normalize rates as rapidly as they did last year, and that should be good news. So if we have a lot of people getting jobs, we have a lot of people spending money, we have a consumer-driven economy, that's likely to drive earnings to a place that's going to be better this year than it was last year. And our estimates for earnings this year are in low double digits. So the early reaction to the fact that good news is bad news, good news on the economic data front is bad news for the market, typically is transitory. It typically sifts through and we take a step back after we think about this and say, wait a minute, if a lot of people are being employed and spending money, earnings are likely going to be better than expected. So I think the reaction in the markets thus far this year, very much like the beginning of last year, is a bit overdone, and I think that the market has a good chance of doing better than we've seen for the first couple of weeks.
On the air live with Art Hogan, veteran market strategist at B. Riley Wealth Management, based here in Southern California. January, of course, an important month for the stock market. The January indicator, right? Looks like we've erased that post-election rally at this point. How are we doing so far, given this market here right now, and the outlook for the rest of the month? And indeed, is that bullish enthusiasm that we saw after the election still present?
Yeah, that's a great point, Frank. So the Trump bump or the bounce the market got after the election results in November has largely dissipated, and that's okay. I did to a certain extent. That was predicated on the concept of 3 things. I think the potential for a new administration that was likely going to be ushering in a lighter regulatory touch, perhaps cutting taxes, and certainly being a little bit more business friendly. And I think it's going to take the first 100 days of the new administration to really see how those policies play out. So I think we got a little bit of enthusiasm post the election that has dissipated. But I would say the majority of last year's gains, which were 20% of last year's gains, came before the election. That was really driven by better economic activity and better earnings. And I think that we're likely to have those same tailwinds as we head into the new administration. Now, we're going to keep a close eye on what the president does with tariffs. Will they be applied universally, or will they be used more surgically like they were in 2018? We'll keep a close eye on deregulation, and will that help businesses, the energy complex or the banking complex or the very heavily regulated industries? And that's going to be important. But most importantly, it'll be what the Fed perceives as the risk to the economy with the new administrations, their new policies, and how they react to that. So we probably don't see the Fed do anything in the first quarter, maybe even in the first half in terms of interest rates. But I think at this point in time, that's okay. I think it's okay because we've got full employment. That's one of their mandates. And inflation is gradually working down closer to their target of 2%, but the last mile has been difficult. So I think I clearly believe there's more tailwinds than headwinds as we head into 2025. And I think when we start getting earnings next week, the earnings season kicks off with the major financials. And then the next 3 weeks, we'll have some great reports from the fourth quarter and some guidance for 2025. I think the complexion and the attitude of the markets will probably reverse for the better.
On there live with Art Hogan, veteran market strategist at B. Riley Wealth Management. Getting back to what's happening here in Southern California, which impacted the markets today, and that is the insurance business. The insurance company stocks taking a big hit today with insurers exposed to the California homeowners market selling off sharply today, and just absolutely eye-popping losses in very wealthy neighborhoods here, Pacific Palisades included along the coast here, Malibu and so forth. Art Hogan, are some of these companies going to make it through all of this? And what are your thoughts about this epic disaster here from the insurance company standpoint?
Yeah, it's hard to really estimate the extent of the damage and the extent of the financial liabilities for these companies that insure places in California. And, as we've seen, we've never seen a disaster like this, especially in the population that we've seen. We've certainly seen a lot of major storms that have blown through less populated areas, but this is a disaster that we haven't encountered yet. So it's hard to know how the insurance companies work their way through this, and at the other end of it, how that gets reworked. And I can certainly tell you that it's going to reconfigure how insurance companies think about high-risk properties, whether you're in a place that has the potential for wildfires or whether you're in a flood zone where hurricanes come through. But it's certainly going to shift the concept around insurance and reinsurance. And that's been something that's been slowly happening over the course of the last 3 years. I can tell you this, though, when you contemplate the amount of economic damage that's going on in California right now, that is likely to have a major impact on what we see in jobs numbers for the month of January. And very much like the two major storms that we saw blow through in October, where we expected to see 150 or 200,000 jobs created, we only saw 17,000 jobs created. It's going to start to impact the way the Fed thinks about monetary policy. We're going to see some bumps in the road for the economy because of what's happening in your neighborhood, in and around your neighborhood right now, Frank. And that's going to be something the Fed has to at least put into their collection of data. And I certainly think that it's hard to know and hard to calculate right now, but it's certainly something that's going to have a major impact on the economic outprint for the first quarter of next year.
And it should be noted, it's not over yet. It's still going on with most of these fires and not anywhere near containment at this point. And winds expected to flare up again this weekend, certainly by Monday. So still a very, very nervous time here given this very catastrophic weather and the fire situation that people here in this area are facing. Art Hogan, any other thoughts about how the economy is expected to play out this year? Any recession talk because of this disaster here? Obviously, we're in the second largest economy in the United States here in the Los Angeles area. With this kind of catastrophe, what kind of impact do you expect?
Yeah, so Frank, that's such a great question, and there is going to be an enormous impact on economic growth, and then the reconstruction efforts further down the road then offer a positive impetus to the economic growth of the country. So it's one of those conundrums that you have where you have some major disaster, and then the rebuild actually causes economic activity. That the economic term for that is the broken window fallacy. At the end of the day, there is definitely be a dent in the U.S. GDP because of what's happening in California right now in the first quarter of this year. Now, is that enough to derail what I think is a pretty strong economic growth for this year? Probably not, but it's certainly going to make an impact, and it's certainly going to make an impact on the way the market perceives what the Federal Reserve does, and certainly what the market perceives the earnings power of the S&P 500. At this point in time, it's impossible to calculate that, to your point, unless and until we know the extent of the damage. But, my thoughts go out to everyone in California, and it's incomprehensible the amount of devastation that's going on right now.
And last but not least, Art, briefly, let me ask you the big question. I knew you were expecting any specific places where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table.
Yeah, the three things I would say, Frank, is we still love the artificial intelligence Magnificent Seven, but I don't think you'd want to overweight them. If you owned them last year, you're overweight just because they're a spectacular performance. You want to get back down to a market rate on those. What I think is going to do very well this year are things like energy. Energy's had a very nice bump in the last month. I think that continues to be an outperformer this year. It was one of the worst performing sectors in the S&P 500 last year. I also think things that underperformed last year, like materials and industrials, actually have a very good performance this year. So keep market weight in your Magnificent Seven artificial darlings, but look at some of the other performers from last year, because I think there's going to be a lot of mean reversion as we head into 2025.
Art Hogan, Managing Director, Chief Market Strategist at Los Angeles-based B. Riley Wealth Management. Art, thank you very much for taking the call. We wish you and everyone there all the best and a happy and healthy new year, and look forward to speaking with you again very, very soon.
Frank, thank you very much, and stay safe, my friend.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And now to the freeways we go right now on 790 KBC. Frank Mottek here. Did you know that for more than 10,000 years, gold has been the greatest store of value and considered a safe haven asset to preserve your wealth? Now with the U.S. debt at more than $36 trillion and climbing, a possible recession on the horizon, and the development of the digital dollar, central bank digital currency, it's more critical now than ever before to safeguard your assets like your cash savings and retirement accounts with physical gold. Opening a gold IRA is one of the best ways to secure your wealth and create a stable financial future. Stop worrying about your retirement and the markets and cash savings in the bank. Feel confident, prepared, and in control with physical gold and silver. Give Joe Morgan a call now at 1-800-753-8534. Mention Frank Mottek, and you could get $1,000 worth of silver with a qualifying purchase. Call now, 1-800-753-8534, or visit UnitedGoldGroup.com. Mottek On Money continues here in Southern California on 790 KBC. 10 dead, 10,000 homes and businesses destroyed in the Los Angeles area in the ongoing firestorm catastrophe. The unthinkable has happened this week. Leadership being called into question here in Los Angeles. The response by the government very much being examined, and calls for an independent investigation into what's happened here in this catastrophe. Joining us live now is Michael Levine, veteran Los Angeles public relations executive, media expert, and longtime Southern California resident, who I know is heartbroken by what's happened this week as well. Michael Levine, thank you very much for coming to the line here this afternoon.
Well, thank you, Frank, for sharing your very, very valuable audience with me during this disastrous moment in the city's history. In all of the history of the city of Los Angeles, this will be noted as one of the worst moments our city has ever faced.
And you've lived it. You've lived it through many disasters. I've known you since I've been here, which has been decades. Michael Levine, the level of loss and catastrophe there in Malibu and Palisades, as well as in the San Gabriel Valley. I know you probably know many people who've lost their homes.
I do. Frank, I'd like to use my time, if I may, to strongly endorse the naming immediately of an independent review panel. This must be reviewed in the same way that there was a 9/11 commission. This is an example of our city's This is a symbol of our city's 9/11 moment. The response of our city has been nothing short of nauseating. How the mayor of the city of Los Angeles could somehow be briefed 3 days in advance of the fire, told that there was a high likelihood of heavy wind conditions, and then make a decision on taxpayer money to go to Guyana, again, paid for by you and I, that's considered good judgment. This police fire chief we have, Kristen Crowley, who I've never met, when she was sworn in 2022, she said she was super inspired to make the department more diverse. That is her high priority. Now, a fire chief, in my opinion, should have 3 top priorities. Number 1, public safety. Number 2, public safety. Number 3, public safety. I don't give a damn about all these virtue signaling, DEI, feel good, sound poetic things when you have no water in your fire hydrants. These are people, Frank, that I frankly don't think would be qualified in the private sector to manage an Applebee's. It's pathetic. It's embarrassing to the city. They may well be well-intentioned people, right? I don't judge their intentions. And I'm not a Republican. I am an independent. I'm a radical pragmatist. I want to know what works. But you got to get your priorities straight. This DEI nonsense is just not, you can only do so many things in a governmental organization. You only have so many resources. You must laser focus on public safety. That's your responsibility, and we have failed miserably. F-. And I look forward, I hope there will be a commission named, though I doubt it, because frankly, all of the people are of the same political party, that's the Democratic Party, and they're going to be very unlikely to investigate themselves because they know they will come out atrociously if there's an independent investigation.
On the air live with Michael Levine, veteran LA public relations executive and media expert, a longtime resident here in Southern California. A lot of people, of course, sharing your complete outrage about what's happening here. We had Rick Caruso on this program earlier this week who highlighted the unbelievable reports of the fire hydrants running dry in the midst of the fire emergency in the Palisades when the firestorm cut through that entire area, and that's going to be a big part of the investigation that we heard from the head of the LADWP this week. Michael, you might have seen that news conference. What's your reaction to that part of the story?
It's outrageous. It's simply surreally outrageous. I feel like I'm living in a Twilight Zone episode. They cut the mayor cuts the budget along with the city council, another group of buttes, I must tell you. They cut the budget for the firefighters by almost $18 million. Now you have predictable fires. There are certain, if you live in Los Angeles, you know there's going to be certain fires. If you live in certain areas. So to cut the budget while never, ever, ever, ever cutting the budget for any social justice experiment that they love is just beyond contemptible. And not only should they resign, the governor should resign, in my opinion, given it's unconscionable. The mayor should resign. The fire chief should resign. It's unconscionable, and they owe to the people who died, the family members, and to the people whose houses have been lost. An apology is insufficient.
Absolutely shocking. Like I said, the unthinkable has happened this week. Michael, any final thoughts here as we see this fire emergency continuing as we speak?
Well, I don't think we're through the worst necessarily. I hope to God we are, but we may not be. And given the competence level and the lack of preparation, again, as Mr. Caruso so properly stated, though he speaks with a little less passion than I, he's absolutely right. Why weren't we prepared? That's a fair and reasonable question. Now, you're not going to stop all fires, and this one is of historic nature. I acknowledge it. However, dear God, you can't get water in fire hydrants in the second largest city in the most affluent country in the history of humanity?
Yeah. Michael Levine, thank you very much for joining us live here. Mottek On Money, 790 KABC.
Actor Michael Rosenbaum, he knows some of the most talented people in the business, and now he's getting the inside story.
Let's get inside of Heather Graham. I can't look at like Boogie Nights and think that you were a nerd. Johnny Knoxville. You think you're going to do another Jackass movie? What do your kids want?
Dad's not going to do that. Yeah. You got to be careful how you choose your heroes.
Hear from some of the most fascinating people in pop culture today.
Danny Trejo. You're a legend. Do you know you're a legend?
You can't be a legend having this much fun.
The Inside of You podcast. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.